Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Data on Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher, and of course, when we're talking data and analytics, we're bringing in Sam Finkel to help us break down all the numbers and explain what they mean. And as we promised to do after the draft, we already did the guys that the Eagles drafted, but Sam said, let's go and do the UDFAs because there's some interesting information on them. I agree. And in this episode, we'll go through the rookie free agent signings, the guys who are undrafted. Now, it's a little tricky, Sam, right? Because these guys are a little bit lesser known. They may not have had combine testing, may not have had a pro day, or if they did, the information may not be available because some of them come from small schools. So I imagine this was a little bit more difficult to find out data and information that helps you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is obviously the last episode of the series. So, we really appreciate everyone coming this far. I will say this data is definitely a little bit different than what you've seen throughout the series, as you kind of hinted at. We don't have those testing numbers for production and athleticism for 70% of the UDFA class. But we still tried to, supplement that data with things that should be helpful in explaining these signings.
What jumped out to you just from an overall standpoint about, and by the way, before I even asked that question, because you and I were discussing this before we recorded, UDFA signings for the Eagles are pretty vital. Last year, one did not make the 53-man roster, but if you look at the previous years before that, we came up with 5 or 6 names from Josh Jobe, who's no longer with the team, but playing a significant role with the Seahawks. Eli Ricks is with the team. A starting safety who's probably going to get an extension pretty soon. Reed Blankenship made the team. We mentioned we thought about Josh Sills, the offensive lineman who made it, and then he wound up getting in trouble and he's no longer with the team. But there were a bunch of names that we went through. I'm like, yep, that guy made it as a UDFA. That guy made Ben Van Sumeren, who's going to play fullback this year. So more often than not recently, a UDFA will make the 53.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think this class should be no different than the previous streak, and different than last year, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And what jumps out at you about this class?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting. So the Eagles' strategy, so there are 10 players in the UDFA class and 10 players in the draft, and it was very complementary. So there were 6 offensive players in the UDFA signing and 4 defense. And the draft had 6 defensive players and 4 offensive players. So I think that's just very interesting strategically how they allocated the signings and their draft capital.
Good point. And I know that the fact that they didn't sign even an undrafted rookie free agent tight end is pretty interesting, just given the Dallas Goedert situation. But it's not a position where the Eagles lack numbers, right? They've got Greg Calcaterra, they got Harrison Bryant, they've got Kylan Granson, they've got EJ Jenkins that they've been developing. It's just a situation where they don't have a clear replacement for everything Dallas Goedert does. They didn't get it in the draft. You're certainly not going to find that on the UDFA market. That would have just been another dart throw at a guy.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting that they didn't address tight end. Mm-hmm. But I think for all the reasons you mentioned, that is likely why.
Yeah. What about from a testing and measurables, any standpoint, before I put the names up on the screen, is there any one person? And by the way, we have the UDFA signings, and then also I want to throw in, we have the wide receiver, Giles Jackson, who made the team on a tryout basis. That makes him a UDFA, but he was not an immediate. He actually had to go to that rookie camp and then get signed to make the team. But is there anything that jumped out to you individually about any one of the players?
Yeah, so as we discussed in the running back episode and a couple times throughout just the general draft thoughts, this running back class was extremely deep. And so the signing of MontrellJohnson is actually considered a gem if he were to be drafted. And I think that just goes to the depth of this class. And I think MontrellJohnson probably does get drafted in a weaker running back class.
Right. Gems were the upper, for those who need to remember with the chart, were the upper left quadrant of Sam's scatter charts. And what they were usually guys who tested really well athletically, and that's why they were on the upper left side. They weren't as productive. Maybe they were in a timeshare. Maybe they had an injury. Maybe somebody else above them was just as good and used more, and so their production didn't match their athleticism, which sometimes can be okay because you can find guys, and that's why they're called gems, because you might have hit on somebody. So you have some expectations for MontrellJohnson.
Yeah, and you just actually hit the nail on the head of kind of his situation, right? He had the knee issue, had some surgery at the beginning of the season, and shared the backfield as a result and was week to week.
Right. And look, if you look at the Eagles running back situation, clearly Saquon Barkley and Will Shipley are locked into 2 spots, but nothing's guaranteed with A.J. Dillon. You know, we know that he missed all of last year with the nerve issue, right? And, you know, obviously they released – I was a little surprised that they waived Ty Davis-Price when they signed Giles Jackson, who we'll talk about in a second, because he was with the team the whole year. They still have Lou Nichols, who has failed to make the team for a couple of times now. So, you know, to me, there's 2 guys who are locked into spots, and then your third spot with no more Kenny Gainwell, you're looking for someone who can maybe do what Kenny Gainwell did, catch the ball decently, block decently. And, you know, obviously they signed the kid Avery Williams, who's a return specialist that they will have in the running back room, but he doesn't do what Kenny Gainwell does. So I do think, interestingly, there's an opportunity here for MontrellJohnson, if he's healthy, right, to kind of prove himself.
Yeah, and are you shocked that Howie Roseman took a shot on a Gator?
Our guy? No. Best available Gator, baby. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's take a look for those who are watching on YouTube, and for those who are just listening to the podcast, we will do our best to describe what we are looking at on the screen share here. We try to make it listener friendly as well as viewer friendly for the folks. And here is the first chart, which just shows the class. And there's a big black box for those who can't see that kind of goes into what we talked about as far as the absence of certain scores and athletic testing, right, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's only 3 guys that actually had testing scores. And what's interesting is, and we'll talk about it, is MaxenHook barely missed what we would consider to be fringe gem.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth later, but he basically probably is a guy that should have been drafted too.
There you go.
And honestly, HollinPierce probably should have been too, but he didn't necessarily score as well.
Right. I mean, when you're that, first of all, you have the measurables on HollinPierce in front of you. I think they're worth.
I do.
All right, why don't you go for this? This is worth repeating.
6'8", 341.
Yeah, 6'8", 341. And his wingspan, do you have that? I believe I have it if you don't.
I do not have that on me.
I believe it was 88 3/4 wingspan. Okay. So that's incredible. That is 80. I'm sorry, 88 1/4, which is still incredible. I like to talk about guys who can scratch their knees without bending over. I think this guy, I said this in the other pod with Adam, this guy can clip his toenails without bending. That's how long his arms are. So just incredible length there on HollinPierce.
You can't teach that.
No, you cannot. And honestly, when I asked around some NFL people, like nobody's UDFA list is going to jump out. No NFL people are like, oh my God, that's an incredible list. But one name that came back to me as far as they could see the potential was MaxenHook. You mentioned him. He played at Toledo, so he was a teammate of Quinyon Mitchell's. He's kind of a strong safety type, but when you look at the Eagles safety picture, it's not exactly deep, right? With Sidney Gardner-Johnson drafted, you know, Blankenship and Makuba and Brown are your top 3, but if you're going to keep 4 or 5, then there's some open competition there.
Yeah, and the thing about MaxenHook that I think differentiates him from a lot of the players that they signed and just from the safety group is he could make an instant impact on special teams immediately. I think I have the stat on him, but he led the team Toledo in 2024 with 107 tackles.
Oh, nice.
So he is a guy that could be an instant contributor to special teams and could develop, and for that, there's value in keeping him potentially.
Sounds good. All right. So the only thing that really jumps out to me from the rest of this box is that MontrellJohnson, and you mentioned this, his athletic score at least was a little higher than average with a 3.26, whereas everybody else in athleticism and production among these top 3, Johnson, Pierce, and Hook, they're going to be below because that's why they're, UDFAs, but that is interesting about Montrell. So we'll see if, the athleticism, like I mentioned, comes in hand and Montrell can really battle for a spot on the 53 with the running backs. So now we're going to move to this next chart, Sam, and I'm going to have you explain it for those watching or listening at home. There's a lot of names, so I kind of got to downsize the chart. So hopefully I'll blow it back up for the people watching, but I do want to at least show the whole chart at first here, just so you can explain it.
Yeah, so this one is just the athleticism and production of all drafted, and then the 2 UDFA running backs that the Eagles sign, and then it ranks them as their relative production and athleticism score.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the Eagles, and we didn't mention this already, but they signed 2 running backs, MontrellJohnson being the one, and my favorite name, Shunderick Powell from Central Arkansas being the other. Now, Adam and I joked about this on the podcast. Sam, I'm going to put you under the gun here. Name a famous professional athlete, past or present, who attended Central Arkansas, not named Shunderick Powell. Can you do it?
Well, David Walker was the only one I could think of besides it.
I don't even know who David Walker is.
He was an edge from this class who I really liked.
Okay, not named Shunderick Powell or David Walker.
In that case, I cannot name anyone else.
You're showing your age, my friend. What if I said, think Dynasty Chicago Bulls of the 90s?
Did Rodman go there?
No. Good guess, though, because you would have thought he went to a small place like that. It was actually Scottie Pippen.
Oh, wow.
Hall of Famer, top 50 NBA player, Scottie Pippen.
I guess I didn't realize that Central Arkansas, had produced like that.
If I were Central Arkansas, I'd have a statue. Maybe they do. Maybe they should, because that's really whenever I see Central Arkansas, I think that's what they're kind of known for. Hey, Scottie Pippen went there.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna keep that one in the back of my mind now for sure.
By the way, Rodman went to Southeast Oklahoma State, and then before that was North Central Texas. So you were definitely on the right vein there. So good job by you on that.
I'll take that.
So the interesting thing here about Montrell, again, is the athleticism, right? I mean, where he ranks 8th among all the running backs who are drafted, and then we just don't know about Shunderick Powell's testing because it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I do have his measurements.
Go for it.
He's 5'7", 183.
Yeah, so he's a small guy.
Yeah, so even if he were, have his score, he would be punished for his size, as we've seen throughout this.
Right, because that factors into your athletic testing, your actual physical measurables.
Absolutely.
All right, we will move on to this. This is still a running back stat, but this is now rushing stats for running backs, where we look at them and see where the Eagles fall into place. Now, Powell averaged 7.26 per attempt. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he's a very electric player. He has the highest yards per attempt, as you just said, and among the top touchdowns compared to drafted running backs the 3 years of their career.
Right.
He's a twitchy, elusive player, kind of questionable in the pass game, which is kind of a problem at that size. You would hope that he would contribute a lot more in the pass game. Definitely a long shot to make the roster, but probably a good camp body and somebody that could compete, for some of like those fun gadget plays and maybe in the return game. I don't know, but just a fun player to have in camp at least.
Right. I think the impressive thing about the 7.26 per carry, which is, you have RJ Harvey's 6.62 as the highest, but this is actually the highest, right?
So on all these, I'm glad you brought that up. On all these charts, I did not touch the drafted data because I didn't want to compare the drafted to the undrafted. So they'll never be like the highest.
Fair enough. But what jumps out to me is sometimes you see a guy with a ridiculously high yards per carry average or yards per touch average, and then you realize, he's only touched the ball like a quarter of the time compared to the other guys. But this guy, Powell, has had 526 attempts. That's not, I don't know where that ranks because I'm not going to rank it here right in front of us, but there's plenty of guys who have fewer attempts. He's probably in the top third of guys for attempts, so that's good.
Yeah, it shows, that this average is sustained through volume, which is good.
Right. Okay, let's move. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to say one more thing about MontrellJohnson. So I think that he would fit really well in the Eagles running back room. He loves contact. He's not shy. And in fact, it's probably a weakness of his because he will initiate contact before trying to make a move. But he has good contact balance, and he's not shy of contact. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention about him, and it makes him kind of a fun prospect.
I think the big question we always have to ask for these guys, if they're looking for someone to occupy a Kenny Gainwell spot, is how well do they pass protect and how well do they catch the ball?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, he can pass protect. I don't think he was asked to do it that much at Florida, but he physically can do it.
Right. And by the way, Kenny Gainwell wasn't asked to do it a whole lot in Memphis either. He just turned out to be pretty good at it. All right, now we're going to look at the tackles. Now you've got all the tackles that were drafted, including the Eagles ones, Miles Hinton in the 6th round, Cameron Williams in the 6th round. And then here's, to me, the most intriguing undrafted rookie free agent signing that the Eagles have, and HollinPierce. Again, for those great measurables, that wingspan, we know Stellan loves his developmental projects. What jumps out to you here that you have the green boxes on?
Let me ask you this. What jumps out to you? There's something that's the same on all three of them.
Something that's the same on all three of them. Their athletic scores are all 60.
The same. All 68.
Yeah. But it's not like that's the best athletic. It's just interesting that they're all 68.
Yeah. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just a fun thing to point out.
It is.
But all of them are massive players. They all were, from 6'6" to 6'8". And I think that's interesting that they were looking for a certain archetype in these tackles. But I would not be surprised if HollinPierce made the team. I think that he'll compete with Hinton and Williams. And I think that, who knows of those three who are going to hit. And if they could hit 2 of the 3, that would be incredible.
Oh, God, that would be amazing. If they hit 1 out of 3, that's really good. 2 out of 3 is unbelievable. We're talking about 2 day 3 picks and a rookie free agent signing.
Sure, but all of them had upside to be drafted earlier, and there were reasons. We talked about them for Williams and Hinton. We haven't obviously talked about Pierce, but I think that there's validity in that he could have been drafted. That's certainly a valid thing to say.
Right.
Probably a later a day 3 guy, but he's still, based on just his size alone and how much he played, could easily have been drafted.
Absolutely. All right. We will move on to the pass pro statistics for the tackles. And as you can see, some of the top ones are very good. Kelvin Banks Jr., Wyatt Millum, who's probably going to play guard in the NFL. We'll see what happens with him. Miles Hinton sneaks in there pretty high, pretty good at pressures allowed. Did not allow a lot of pressures at Michigan. They ran the ball a lot too. So you have to take that into account. And then let's look at HollinPierce. What do these numbers mean to you?
Well, so first, one of the things we talked about with Hinton and Williams is the fact that they only played around 600 snaps.
Right.
You look at Pierce, who played about double the amount of snaps, and yet his numbers are somewhat similar, right? He had less or the same sacks allowed, but a worse pressure rate. So I just think that's interesting that even though he was at double the snaps of them, it's somewhat similar results.
Right. Pressure rate is also interesting for all college offensive linemen for bad teams, like bad offensive teams like Rutgers, because if you have a quarterback who's not very good, who holds on to the ball really long, that hurts you as an offensive lineman. If you don't have receivers that separate really well, that forces your quarterback to hold on to the ball, that hurts you and your rating as an offensive lineman because you're giving up pressures, but you might be asked to block 2 seconds longer than somebody at Michigan or Ohio State.
Yeah, that's an excellent point and definitely affected all of the offensive linemen here for sure.
Yeah. All right. Now we're going to look at wide receivers. The Eagles signed a few of those. Darius Cooper out of Tarleton State. Where's Tarleton State, Sam? Do you know?
It's in Texas.
It is right? Texas. Good job. You're 1 for 2. Taylor Morin out of Wake Forest, who sort of projects as a slot receiver. And what about, do we have the kid that, here we go, Giles Jackson, who is the, I guess he's the speedy guy out of Washington, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
And as you can see here, I did add the green on Darius Cooper. But if you look up, there's still the green from the drafted guys, with Travis Hunter having the most touchdowns.
Right. So this guy had 28 total touchdowns?
Yeah, which was the most.
The most now he is Tarleton State would be FCS, right?
Division. I think so. Yeah, it's in. I had it in my notes yesterday, but I don't think I.
They play in the same conference that Jalix Hunt played with at Houston Christian.
Gotcha.
If I'm not mistaken. So, but I forgot the name of the conference already.
Yeah, I forget too.
Find that United Athletic Conference. Look at that.
Right.
I found right away. But yeah, so all right, so it's FCS. That's football college
subdivision or something.
Yeah, but I think that's Division I, FCS, right?
It's still Division I. Yeah. So actually, what's interesting is, he had the second. He was second in Division I total in receiving yards in 2024. He has elite yards per reception, which you have to expect, because if you're going to even be an NFL player at a smaller, FCS school. What's interesting is he's an outside receiver, when next other two guys are probably more slot.
Right.
But he's a 5'11", 210 guy.
5'11", 210 outside receiver. Okay, so this is yards per reception that we're looking at with the decimal number. Josh Jackson, pretty low number there, 10.45.
Yeah. And
we'll talk about a function of where they used him and how they used him.
Yeah. So should I talk about Jackson or Morin real quick?
Both.
Okay.
You have the floor.
So Morin, similar stats to all the late round receivers. There's nothing too special in terms of his statistics. He was predominantly a slot receiver, as you said. He can return punts. He's 5'10", 176, but that data is not from the NFL. The NFL doesn't have official height weight on him. So he probably is a little bit smaller than that. As we'll talk about. And honestly, from his film, there's nothing that special about him that I felt. But Jackson, I kind of feel a little bit differently about. He's 5'9", 187. Again, not confirmed by the NFL, so you probably got to assume that's a little bit smaller and lighter. He is a great returner, so I think there's a chance he can compete with Avery Williams for that spot potentially. Like you said, he was the last signing, and it doesn't really count as the UDFA class because it was after they cut TDP. He started at Michigan. He has, like you said, the lowest yards per reception. He lined up predominantly in the slot, around 80% between 2023 and 2024. Hovered around that number. I think he was above in one and slightly under in the other. And then we talk a little bit about RAS. He is a 7.55 RAS.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So his speed grade and agility grade are both great. His explosion grade is good, and his size grade is very poor. So that's what really hurts him.
It does seem that the Eagles have placed a little bit of a priority this offseason on trying to find that sort of number 3 inside receiver / punt returner, because, they let Britton Covey go. He signed with the Rams. Well, I don't mean they let him go. His contract was up, but he signed with the Rams. Anais Smith did not seize the mantle last year, had an injury, slow start in training camp. They clearly didn't trust him. They don't want Cooper DeJean. Well, Vic Fangio doesn't want Cooper DeJean returning punts this year. He put up with it last year, but he's not probably going to do it again. I'm sure Howie doesn't want him either. It's not like Vic Fangio against the world. I don't think they want Cooper DeJean to have that role and expose himself to injury. So where do they go? And now it seems like there's some dart throws here at guys who can challenge Anais Smith and Avery Williams, the guy who, they really want to see have that role. But, what if he's hurt, right?
Yeah.
You got to have other options. So these are probably some pretty good practice squad candidates for that reason and that reason alone.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. None of these guys are game changers, but they could be interesting, competitions. They could create some interesting competitions.
All right, we'll see. And then linebackers. I thought the Eagles would be a little more aggressive, just because when you get to your training camp and OTAs, you got third and fourth stringers. You need a lot of bodies at that position. And right now they don't have a lot of bodies, even with Smile Munden, even with Campbell, who, even if he's healthy by training camp, that's 2, Trotter's 3, Bond is 4, and Dallas Gant's 5, right? They don't have too many with Nakobe Dean hurt, and with Ben Van Sumeren now at fullback, which they seem very dedicated to. They just don't have a ton of bodies. I thought there would be a little bit more, but Lance Dixon from Toledo gives them a 6. And the third Toledo player here.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very interesting. But what's interesting about Lance Dixon is he didn't start out at Toledo. Do you remember where he started out?
Man, I did. Penn State, right? And then West Virginia?
Say that again. Sorry, my audio cut out.
I think it was Penn State, and then he went to West Virginia.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So he was actually there with me at Penn State in 2019 when I was there. Yeah.
You got the inside intel. Is he a good kid?
Yeah, he's a good kid. Yeah, he's a good kid.
Good.
And I definitely am rooting for him to make the team. I know it's a long shot. But, if you look at his snap count, it's the lowest of all of them here.
Isn't that because he was a different position? Didn't he start off as a safety? I could be wrong.
Correct. Yeah, he was a 5-star safety converted to linebacker.
Right.
And he has an okay tackle rate and a solid missed tackle rate. A good athlete, good instincts, good kid. Not much else to really say about him, but yeah.
You almost have to extrapolate here. If he played 800 snaps and had 57 tackles, right? That means if he played theoretically 1,600 snaps, maybe he'd have 114 tackles, which if you look at others who had 1,600, Smile Mondon had 152. I'm trying to think. Somebody around the 6. There's not too many. Like 15. Chris Paul Jr. 169. So they're still more than him. Kobe King 142.
Yeah,
just an interesting extrapolation there.
For sure, and you can use that total tackle rate to help with that extrapolation.
Right. He would have a decent amount of missed tackles too if you extrapolate that to about 26. Man, Jalen Walker 9. That's incredible, right? Jihad Campbell 14. Pretty darn good right there.
Right.
But not worse than Danny Stutzman. So,
Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman. We talked a lot about those guys.
Yeah. And Greg Cosell said, "I just don't get it with people Danny Stutzman, and that missed tackle rate might be exactly why."
Yep.
But again, I think with Dixon, I don't want to say he has a good chance to make it 53, but he's going to get a lot of opportunities simply because of the lack of healthy bodies at that position right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great point.
All right, moving on to safeties. This is where MaxenHook falls into the range. And this is just athleticism and production right now. Not bad. He's, 13 production, 12 athleticism. There's certainly guys who were drafted who have lower rankings than him in one or the other, if not both. Like Dante Trader falls behind him both from Maryland. He went to the Dolphins in the 5th round.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does have a better athleticism score than Makuba. But let's be very clear, they're very different athletes.
Yes.
Makuba is very much punished for his frame, as we've emphasized in the past, but Makuba is a better athlete than Hook. Right. Let's not even put that out there. It's very night and day between the two athleticisms. Hook is 6 foot, half an inch, 202, ran a 4.55 40-yard dash. I know that he has a relationship with Quinion, and I love that there's an emphasis on relationships and synergy and continuing that at the next level.
Yep.
Hook was a 4-year starter. Like you said, scores are better than some of the drafted players, which is just really cool getting that as a UDFA. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's awesome about Hook is he has what is one of the big emphasis of the Eagles' strategy is positional versatility. He lined up all over the defensive backfield. He was first team All MAC for 3 out of the 4 years he started, and I think he was third team the other year.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, led the team with 107 tackles in 2024, and going to add value immediately on special teams. He had 7 interceptions in his career and 7 touchdowns, but they weren't all pick sixes. I think that's a little bit misleading, but I think it's just a fun way say that.
Right. It is. By the way, you're talking about the relationships. Again, his head coach at Toledo, Jason Candle, very close with Nick Sirianni. They were teammates in college at why can't I remember the name of the college that
The
Nick
purple school.
Yeah, what's the name of the college? Come on, Geoff. Either way, I think they were both wide receivers as well.
Mount Union.
Mount Union, yes, thank
Yep.
you. I don't know why I couldn't. That's a really good football school, D3 football school. So Mount Union, which I believe is in Ohio. But either way,
relationships are important, and this
yeah.
is just another example of it.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's a great name. MaxenHook is an awesome football name.
Shunderic Powell, MaxenHook. I think they're HollinPierce even. They're winning in the football name category.
Sure. And then the next one, Mac McWilliams, another good football name. I'm intrigued by this guy. He's obviously a draft pick, but he's on this list. The UDFA guys are BJ Mays and Brandon Johnson, but Mac McWilliams is a great football name.
Great football name for sure.
All right, these are the pass statistics for corners. So you see where BJ Mays and Brandon Johnson land here.
I just want to be very clear. I didn't use statistics like this for the episode for safeties or corners because I don't like them here. Because I don't think they tell the full picture, and they're all volume dependent. People that have more snaps will have worse stats just most of the time. So this is really good at telling you who the best guys are and who the worst guys are. But anybody in between, it doesn't do a great job and doesn't do justice. You have to watch film. That's the only way to really know. This stats will tell you the elite guy and the really bad guy, but it won't really help you separate in between, especially the stats that are shown here. But I put them because I wanted to have a visual here. That's the reason. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I agree with you. I mean, when you talk about a defensive back, and I guess yards and receptions and yards is what they allowed here, and yards per reception, there are so many variables. It's really, I agree with you. It's not always the fairest. I mean, are they in man? Are they in zone? Like, is it close? Like, if it's 3rd and 8 and you gave up or 3rd and 10, right, and you give up a 9-yard pass and made the tackle in front of the sticks, that's good, but it counts like against your completion percentage which is not here, completions percentage. But I'm just talking about those kind of stats in general. Don't always tell the full story. Sometimes you're coached to do things a certain way on certain down and distances, and I agree with you. I think it's very difficult.
But with that caveat in mind, I still wanted to give some statistics here, so I did. Okay. Let's talk about these guys. So BJ Mays is 6 foot 187.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact about him. He was teammates with one of the quarterbacks selected in this class. Can you guess which one?
He was teammates with one of the quarterbacks at this class. Well, he went to Texas A&M.
Yep, but he went somewhere else before.
Right. So you're not talking about Quinn Ewers, who was drafted, right?
Right.
That would be the – oh, no, I'm sorry. Ewers was Texas. Teammates with one of the quarterbacks. I'd say Dylan Gabriel?
Nope. Cam Ward.
Oh, you know what? I mentioned that in the pod. That's right. It was at Incarnate Word.
Yep. And then he went to UAB after.
Yeah.
But BJ Mays is interesting. He had 4 career interceptions, kind of lacks that top end speed, but projects to be a slot corner, which is interesting. Both of these guys could be slot guys. Brandon Johnson, can play slot. He predominantly played slot at Oregon, but he was at Duke before that, and he kind of moved around a little bit more. He's 5'10", 185. He had 173 tackles, 22 TFLs, 8 sacks, and 3 interceptions.
Right.
So he's an interesting guy. Both of them are interesting. Not really game changers, either one of them. With that being said, the yards per reception, it looks like there's a clear divide around 10. 10 is like pretty good, and they're both right at 10. So for what that is worth, with the caveat we both explained, they both are interesting players. Both probably have a hard battle, to get roster spot. But
right,
yeah.
All right, and that is a look at the UDFA. Again, this just jumps out to me. He allowed 7 touchdowns, Brandon Johnson at Oregon, which is on the higher end of the corners who were drafted. But Oregon was blowing every team out all year long until the college football playoffs. So they probably faced more passing. Well, I didn't. Do we have his snaps? I might have missed it. Either way, we don't. But I'm just saying, like, they probably had to face more passing than most teams because they were up by 20, 25 points by halftime in a lot of their games.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of those touchdowns were when he was at Duke. I'm just going to confirm that. Really
That
quick.
makes sense too. Yeah.
But I that's what I would guess if I had to.
Sure.
Brandon Johnson, defense. Okay. Yeah. So of the touchdowns, no, actually, 4 of them Oregon, 2 Duke, 3. So 3 Duke, right, and 4 Oregon.
Yeah.
But he played a lot more snaps at Duke than he did at Oregon. Almost 1,500. Yeah.
Well, he only spent 1 season at Oregon, correct?
Yeah. But I'm saying like each year, so 810, then 745, then 649 total.
Oh, okay. So he played fewer snaps per season at Oregon.
Yeah, that's
okay. I would have thought the opposite, just because again they've had to face so many passing. But maybe he came out after they would be up by 25, 30 in the third quarter.
That's
another
awesome.
Great name, 49ers, Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. I love it.
Yes, and he had 49, receptions allowed.
The 49ers, that's unbelievable. That's as crazy as all 3 Eagles offensive tackles with a 68 athletic rating.
I think it was meant to be. There's conspiracy.
Absolutely. Great work. That is good stuff on the UDFA class. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Give me the one UDFA you think that has the best chance to make it.
HollinPierce. Is that the easy answer? Let me give you the second one, the MaxenHook. I think that it's those 2 guys. I'd love to see MontrellJohnson make it too, but that's just being optimistic.
I think the Eagles would expect that if MontrellJohnson has a really good camp, that they could get him through waivers and onto the practice squad because he's a running back. Nobody's afraid to lose a running back.
Yeah,
offensive tackle, you're afraid, especially one of that massive. Probably the same thing with MaxenHook. It's just that I think we agree that it's just that the opportunity might be there if he plays really well to win a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think his special team value is a huge part of, if he does make the team, that would be part of the reason.
Sure. You could absolutely see him bumping off Eli Ricks, who's enters year 3. And if he doesn't really prove that he belongs, then you have a different guy to give that shot to.
Absolutely.
So. All right, great stuff. That is it for Inside the Data. For Sam Finkel, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Catch you on the next one.
Thank you for the series, by the way. This was a lot of fun, and appreciate everyone that listened all the way through.
No doubt. We've always had a great time, and we do appreciate the feedback. If you have any questions for Sam, maybe, this just hit me recently. Maybe we'll get an Inside the Data mailbox pod, right? So
I would love that.
Any questions, whether about data, analytics, anything that you hear or have heard on any of the Inside the Data podcasts, email us at insidethebirds@gmail.com and specify you have a question for Sam and ask it. And if we get like 3, 4, 5, then I'll say, Sam, let's do a Q&A mailbag pod. And I'm sure you'd be down for that, right?
Absolutely. That sounds like a lot of fun.
All right. I'm glad we just thought of that real quick. Yeah. All right. Then now officially that's going to do it for Inside the Data. Sam Finkel. I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks everybody for watching.